Welcome to this Writing Center webinar, Writing a Character Sketch. I am Julie Johnson Archer, the director of the Writing Center, joined by our amazing Christy Apostle. And we welcome your feedback. So if you would like to download the PDF of the slides today, you can access all the links that we've provided, including a link here to our webinar feedback form. We love your feedback on making these webinars and recordings the most relevant to meet your needs. So for this webinar, we're going to go through these three learning objectives. First, we're going to understand empathy as a writing skill. Second, learn how to write a character sketch and what that means. And we'll apply these principles to an example Bible course, BITO 342, specifically the week 2 assignment 1 character sketch in the wild assignment. There are 2 parts to this assignment, so we'll talk about preparing an infographic. This one's about space and time, and drafting a reflective essay reflecting on how context shapes people. So if you happen to be in that class, great, you're going to get some good information regarding this assignment, but these concepts are really helpful for a variety of writing skills. So if you are not in that class, you can take pieces of these principles and learning objectives and apply them to your other work. So digging into our first learning objective, understanding empathy as a writing skill, you might think, what does this have to do with academic writing? Well, the tasks that we're going to talk about later often involve the skill of empathy. And so we want to dive into what does that mean? Scholar Brene Brown argued this definition of empathy. Empathy is the most powerful tool of compassion, and it's an emotional skill set that allows us to understand what someone is experiencing and to reflect back that understanding. She often compares empathy to sympathy, which is more like pity, whereas empathy is a skill set of compassion. And you might have heard someone try to say that empathy is not so great a thing because it can manipulate people who are trying to really just be rational and think with their logical mind, not their emotions. But that's not really what we're talking about. That would consist of emotional manipulation. But to get a bit more into the writing aspect, we have cognitive empathy. And this is sometimes called perspective taking. This is the ability to recognize and understand another person's emotions. And affective empathy, on the other hand, is feeling something along with the person who is struggling. And that can actually be a slippery slope toward becoming overwhelmed and not being able to offer meaningful support. So, why are we talking about all this? Cognitive empathy is that important skill to practice the value of compassion because it allows us to connect and understand how or why someone feels the way they do, which is important when writing about another person, their context, and their experience. So, important to these writing skills is understanding how context shapes content. And what do we mean by context and content? Well, context has to do with the time period, the history, and the life events that take place. Context can include things like family background, cultural customs and practices, someone's work or career and their educational experience, their space, their place in the world, and their culture, along with their religious background. All of these aspects can build the context around a person or character that you are investigating or writing about. And the content of their life or their character, it includes things like their theology, in other words, their beliefs about God, their understanding and their claims that they make. If you're reading someone else's writing, that's part of their content, their beliefs, their ideas, their writing, and their character. So all of the things on the left side can influence and inform all the things on the right side of the screen. And we'll get into an example in a minute to illustrate this. But lastly, wrapping up this idea about empathy and its importance as a writing skill, reading and writing involve seeking understanding. So, reading someone's writing to seek understanding involves acknowledging their context. We don't want to take their writing out of context and kind of say, well, they said this, which obviously means X. If you're not considering their historical context, religious background, and, and other aspects, we might not gain a full understanding of that person's work or their beliefs. And then writing about someone requires seeking to understand their motivations. What affected the content they wrote? What reasons did they use to support their claims? All of this is a practice of cognitive empathy, and it will really enhance your writing skills if you practice asking these questions and coming to your writing with this understanding. So now Christy is going to get us into our second learning objective.
Thank you, Julie. Now for learning objective 2, we'll discuss how to write a character sketch. Content from the course provides some insight on incorporating theology into a character sketch, which is something that you'll need to do. The various contexts that make up the world around us contribute to how we make sense of the world, which includes the way we understand and reflect on God. So Julie talked about this in the content section previously. No matter how much we try to avoid or ignore it, every person is a product of their context. Or to put it more artfully, no person exists in a vacuum, absent of outside forces that shape and form them. In this class and this assignment, you will explore how the culture and events of a person's life contribute to the way they understand and articulate their own theology. With this information about a theological context on our minds, let's dive into some basics of a character sketch for this learning objective. So let's just ask the plain, obvious question: what is a character sketch? It's a written description of a person or a character, and it includes details such as about their characteristics, their experiences and the motivations. And as Julie mentioned, we're going to be providing an example to illustrate how that might look, these 3 items. And a character sketch also includes the historical cultural context of a person that shapes their theology or their beliefs about God, as we've been discussing. So to see how these basics might look in practice, we can examine an example character. So we have decided that Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings is an excellent example for this assignment. In this case, we have decided that he's one of our favorite characters from a movie or book, or we could say from a movie and a bunch of books. So to further go into detail with the 3 items mentioned earlier, let's describe Sam's characteristics. Sam is loyal, humble. He's protective, definitely. He's protective of his home and his friends. He's wise. He has to make some tough decisions, and some of them spur of the moment. And usually he's pretty spot on. Sam is sacrificial. He's devoted, and he's a caretaker. And again, he's a caretaker of multiple aspects of his life, including his friends and, of course, Frodo, but also of the earth. So let's look at that, how that might play out in his experiences. He cares greatly for gardening. He is definitely shaped by the camaraderie of his family and his friends. He also experiences, obviously, a journey or a quest, we'll also say later on. He experiences adversities, many adversities, in the course of The Lord of the Rings. And then finally, restoration. But what are Sam's motivations? So, what really drives him? What keeps him going throughout this journey and this quest? Friendship, his family, his mission. He remains steadfast and looking ahead with the mission in mind. He's also motivated by goodness, a sense of goodness. He's motivated by his home and preserving it. And he's also motivated by a simple life. He's not asking for a lot, which is a really beautiful notion.
Thanks for that, Christy. We're going to expand more on our example here in a little bit. Um, but we want to go over some of the main aspects of the week 2 assignment 1 character sketch in the wild and remind you of what the assignment's purpose is to begin. So, the purpose of this particular assignment is to reflect on a time and a place different from our own, and you are tasked with understanding how context shapes what we think and say. And so for this assignment, the instructions are to submit 2 items, an infographic, and a short 300 to 500 word essay. So there are some readings here, and they incorporate Jesus' incarnation and the necessity of awareness of time and space. So, this character sketch explores the historical cultural context, which they've termed time and space, for the history and the culture, the space of a particular person. And it's reflective because we're asked to reflect on their contexts and how they helped shape their theology specifically. In this course, theology refers to how they understood and spoke about God. So you won't be picking your own mythical, fictional character like we are. You're tasked to choose between Maya Angelou, the poet, or Oscar Romero, the bishop. Um, and you'll be reading some of their writings and maybe hearing some of their what their spoken poetry and their preachings. So those are the contexts and contents that you will be reflecting on. But let's dig into the 2 parts of this assignment and we'll give more examples in the next slides. So starting with the infographic.
Thank you again, Julie. Since we now have just kind of that basic overview of the instructions that Julie gave us, let's look in detail at the guidelines specifically for the infographic, which the assignment really suggests that you should do first. This infographic has 2 parts, as we've been discussing, space and time. So to think about space, consider some features of the life story of the person that you choose. As Julie mentioned, you have those 2 people to choose from. Consider their family. So you're really digging into more than their writing here. This is what shaped their writing or their theology. Consider their family and their work. Consider their education. What was their religious background? And what major life events did they encounter? Also, though, space applies to their physical and social location. So, where did they live? What country? What sort of city or village did they live in, and how did that shape them? What form of government did they encounter? What was the economic situation, not only necessarily in their home, but also just surrounding them in that city, town, or village? And then finally, as you consider space, think about customs and practices. And in that surrounding culture, what kind of customs and practices? were present that they would have encountered quite a bit. And then for part two, for the infographic, you're considering time. So as you do that, think about what were major social and cultural phenomena present in their social location. Some examples could be that you may be more familiar with, depending on um, who you're thinking about researching: segregation, religious persecution. Also, in what ways did these social or cultural phenomenon impact their life? Um, and this aspect of the assignment, just be sure that you focus on sharing 3 to 5 examples, which again, we're going to illustrate a little bit more later on in this presentation. In addition, as you think about time, consider what major movements or events that might have been happening during their life. Civil rights is an example. How are they involved in any of these major events? How did the public around them perceive them because of that involvement? And then kind of think about more of an outcome. What was their legacy because they were involved? Okay, as you put together your infographic and you plan it out and decide how to shape it, some design principles will be useful to explore. Um, as you think about this design that you're going to be shaping, also keep some of these major assignment guidelines in mind, which will, again, we're going to illustrate in a few. So you'll need bulleted pieces of information, and you'll need images of your chosen person's time and space. So keep those details in mind as you think about these design principles, or tips, as we're calling them. The CRAP principles, which is just an acronym for helping to remember these 4 basic design principles. The first is contrast. So if you want to make something different, 2 different elements on a infographic, for instance, then make them obviously different. So you wouldn't want, for instance, a heading in 12-point font and then text in 10-point font. For one, that's too small for an infographic, but also between 10 and 12, there's not an obvious difference. So rather, you would maybe go for a very much larger heading font size than for the text size. Repetition is also important. So you want to choose key elements to repeat. Why? Because this will contribute to coherence and unity. So key elements could be colors. It could be, you have to use images. It could be the styles of your images. So for instance, you wouldn't want actual photographs mixed with sketches. So keep, if you choose to do sketches, then try to do sketches all the way throughout, which, those are easy to find on image searches online. Also, our third tip here, our third principle, is alignment. So you want to align elements across intentional lines and margins. So for instance, you wouldn't want to center some of your headings and then put some of the headings at the left margin, because your audience wouldn't really know where to look for common information. So if your audience starts looking for headings in order to get an overview of your infographic, and headings are all over in different spaces and places, then you're really taxing the audience, and they're going to come confused about the direction or the flow of information. And then our final tip here is proximity. And this one, you're going to place elements that belong together close to one another. So you want them approximate. So for instance, if you have an image that is about some of your bulleted information and it is closer to content that it doesn't apply to than it is to those bullets, then there could be confusion on the part of the audience. You want this image to be close as possible to the bulleted information to which it applies. The same goes for headings. If you have headings and you have content that it belongs to, you want that heading closer to its content than it is to any other content or even an inapplicable image on your infographic. So continuing with our example of SAM, this sample infographic shows how to implement design principles and assignment guidelines. For example, With design, contrast is present because you have the light background where you see text, and then the text is obviously darker, and that just makes it enhances readability. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you design your infographic. You wouldn't want to choose a kind of gray, deep gray background and then use a murky blue on top of it for the font, because your audience probably wouldn't be able to easily read it. Also, you see alignment on this sample infographic. So, for instance, all of the content, the written words, is aligned at the left. So, remember, I said don't put some headings in the middle, centered, and then some at left. Instead, you can see that these neat lines. Um, let's look at the right side of the infographic, where location, Middle Earth, events, and quests, they're all at the left, and that creates a vertical line in your mind as an audience member. And it just leads to a neat overall look for the infographic. I'll let you apply the other CRAP principles as you think about this infographic and designing your own, because we also have to remember the assignment, as I mentioned, the assignment guidelines. So you can see through these guidelines of the need to include bulleted pieces of information. Each of these sections in this infographic with text, they each have 2 bullets. That is responding to the assignment guidelines, but also we've purposefully included 2 bullets in each to continue to just maintain an overall look of consistency. And then the second major kind of tip within the assignment guidelines is that you'll need those images I mentioned, depicting your chosen person's time and space. And so we have images here that depict Sam's home. And remember, we talked about that with context. Also, customs with the food, the second image. Then we have this important picture of Sam on a journey or a quest, because that, remember, is one of the experiences that were mentioned earlier, and which, of course, that is shaped by the One Ring. And so all of these images here help depict the time and space that Sam was experiencing.
This is great, Christy. I'm just going to add,
Yes, please.
so all of these images are they're copyright free, and so we don't have to give attribution to these, which is a nice aspect. And so a lot of the things that you just search for in Word, or we used Canva to make this handout, you can find the copyright-free images. And so it just makes it simpler to not have to give the citations. But you might ask your professor if you do find an image from a source, you might be asked to give a certain type of citation, and just make sure you follow your professor's instructions for that.
Good point, Julie. Thank you. So as Julie mentioned when she was giving the overview of the assignment, after you have created the infographic, the next step is to write an essay. So in the first half of this slide, you see some basic guidelines for the essay. You're going to be reading through documents for this week too, your assigned readings and resources. And as you do so, you want to identify theological claims made in that document. So we mentioned earlier the book by Smith. And so let's look at a theological claim that they made. We chose to quote in this instance because it's a particularly effective and well-written quote. As Smith discussed, quote, to affirm the goodness of creation is to affirm the goodness of time, time's unfolding in history, and the fruit of this process in tradition, unquote. So let's get into more detail here. We'll review some more of the essay instructions. The first half, or not half really, but the first portion is a 300 to 500 word reflection on your chosen historical figure, the person that you choose. You're looking at their context and then how it helps us understand their content or their theology more fully. Remember that context is the time and space that you'll be placing in your infographic. And then in another portion of your essay, which could amount to about 650 words, but you might want to consult a professor just to be sure as you add these two portions together. In this latter portion, you'll be including a reflection on your own context. So whereas you've already practiced pretty much by reflecting on your chosen person's context of time and space, now you're going to do that for yourself, and how your past or present has helped shape your content or your understanding of God. And then you have a few more basic instructions down in these last two bullets. But I want to move on to the second part of the slide, the second half, because it continues our example and shows how the theology that we looked at on the previous slide then applies to the example that we have been exploring in this presentation. So let's just go ahead and back up and look at it in full. As Smith discussed, to affirm the goodness of creation is to affirm the goodness of time, time's unfolding in history, and the fruit of this process and tradition. Samwise struggled and sacrificed for this very goodness as he journeyed with Frodo on the quest to destroy the One Ring. Okay, let's look at the essay possibilities more with Sam's example, and you will follow this approach with your own chosen character. For instance, so the next, you'll need to, with the essay, as we discussed, have this reflection. And we've shown here how that might look for Sam, and this is what you will be doing for your chosen person. So Sam's context helps me understand his theology more fully because, and we've decided to include 3 reasons here. So that can be something that you'll be thinking about as reasons that you understand your chosen person more. The goodness in Hobbiton helps him believe in the goodness in the world. Also, a second reason, the commitments of his friends keep him steadfast on the quest. And finally, his connection to home, family, and friends make him sacrificial. So basically, he's very much willing to sacrifice himself if needed for his home and his family or his friends. So to finish this assignment, you'll write, as we discussed, that brief reflection about yourself. To reflect, you'll use personalized points and first person. So first person pronouns include words like I, me, and my, which we've illustrated here. So let's look at this example of how you might, some language and wording and approaches and points that you might use as you create that last portion of your reflection. My own context has shaped me and my understanding of God in several ways. First, I have been shaped by, and then you'll fill in the blank for what you feel has shaped you from your context. And then moving on to content or your theology, you could continue with language such as, furthermore, my understanding of God has been impacted by, and again, you would just fill in the blank there. So when you're finished, you'll have Maya to thank and Oscar, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it like Julie did so beautifully. But you'll have either one of them to thank, depending on who you choose. So let's recap what we learned about today in this webinar. We had 3 learning objectives. Number 1, to understand empathy as a writing skill. Number 2, to learn how to write a character sketch exploring a person's character and formation. And number 3, apply these principles. We applied them to an example that week 2, assignment 1, character sketch in the wild. And if you would like to dig further into the sources we used, feel free to consult this references slide. I'm sure some of these sources look familiar to you. And we just, yeah, invite you to dig in more.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Christy. I think the examples here, you can use some of those sentence stems you can use as you outline and draft your assignments. But if you ever want support on this type of assignment, either the infographic or the written, more formal essay, well, you're welcome to reach out to the Writing Center for more individualized support. So the last couple slides here are resources for you for just that purpose. You can find the Writing Center in my ACU, where we have a video tutorial with the steps for making that appointment and how to submit your rough draft or whatever file you're working on. And we can work with you at any stage. So if you don't even have something written yet, or you need help brainstorming, outlining before you get started, we would recommend in that case a Zoom appointment would be really helpful so you can sit with the tutor in Zoom and actually do some of that preparation work. Um, and then we also offer email asynchronous appointments where you upload your draft and we send you feedback via email within 24 hours of your appointment time. Just like our webinars, our appointments are in Central Time. Just a helpful reminder in case you are not in Central Time. Um, you can access many of our writing related resources on our website, including webinar recordings like this one. And again, you can fill out our brief form to give us feedback on our webinars or even request topics and things that you would like to see. Make sure if you do schedule an appointment, you get that confirmation email after you schedule the appointment in our system, it's WC Online. And then anytime before your appointment, go in and make sure you upload a paper, especially for that email asynchronous appointment type, just to give your tutor something concrete to give you feedback on. And then we also have many upcoming webinars. These are just a few for the summer 2 term. And just like this is a virtual release webinar where we record it in advance and post it on our website, we have another virtual release on the 8th of July for planning a podcast. So feel free to watch that if that interests you. A really great follow-up to our intro to APA is also on the 8th, and this is a live event at 7 p.m. Central, Beyond Summary, Adding Analysis and Synthesis to Your Writing. These are essential skills for college and graduate level writing that you're often asked to do in your assignments. So this is one of my favorite webinars that we offer, so I highly recommend it. And then our next installment of our open office hours is on Sunday the 13th, and this is open to all students, but we'll have our multilingual writing specialist present, so dedicated to our multilingual writers especially. So feel free to just drop in, ask a question or two, or hang out with other students as they're asking questions and getting feedback in real time. Some of the key resources we like to highlight here include the link to the ACU library, where you can also access the librarians to meet with them if you have questions about accessing a source or finding a good resource to include in your papers. We have a link directly to our APA template here. Again, if you download the PowerPoint or even just preview the PowerPoint PDF here, you will be able to click on these links and actually access them. We also love to recommend our APA self-paced course. That's a great resource to come back to and quiz yourself on different aspects of writing in APA style and formatting your papers in APA. And then we have many of our webinars on our YouTube channel if you'd like to access us there. Feel free to reach out if you have a question, a follow-up question to this webinar or anything you're working on. Our shared email address is onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. And again, we encourage you to schedule an appointment with us, access our resources, and give us some feedback if you have it. Well, thank you, Christy, for your time. I hope this webinar has been helpful to you. and that you have a great rest of your term.
Thanks, Julie. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening.